The Elzar were a race of peacekeepers, once revered across the galaxy. Their civilization thrived in harmony with nature, and the cosmos. Their technology had advanced far beyond the understanding of many other species. But even the greatest of civilizations could not withstand the chaotic forces of the universe. Their planet was struck by an endless barrage of cosmic storms, storms unlike anything seen before. They ravaged entire cities, tore down structures that had once stood for millennia, and turned fertile lands into barren wastelands. The once vibrant skies were now clouded with dark swirling energy, and the oceans themselves seemed to churn with violent waves that never ceased. The Elzar had done everything they could to adapt to these calamities. They had built domed cities that could withstand the worst of the storms. They had developed technology to shield their people from the worst of the energy surges. But it was never enough. No matter what they tried, the disasters continued to worsen, and soon the very core of their planet began to destabilize. Entire regions of the world were becoming uninhabitable, and it became clear that without drastic intervention their species would face extinction. No one had answers, not even their wisest scientists could offer a solution. And as the situation grew more dire, the Elzar began to realize that their once proud civilization was teetering on the brink of collapse. With no other options left, they made a fateful decision to reach out to the humans of Earth, a race that had only recently begun to venture beyond their own planet. Their messages had been received with curiosity, but the Elzar knew little about humanity's ability to handle such dire circumstances. They had heard rumors of humans being fierce warriors and skilled diplomats, but they had also heard of their flaws and inner conflicts. But the Elzar were desperate, and desperation had a way of stripping away the luxury of doubt. They sent their message into the stars, an urgent plea for help, hoping that the humans would be willing to listen to their plight and offer assistance. They spoke not just of the disasters that ravaged their planet, but of the threats they faced from more aggressive alien forces that had taken notice of their weakening state. The Krinthu, a warlike and brutal race, had begun to circle the Elzar system like vultures waiting for the moment to strike. They had long coveted the Elzar's resources, and now, with the Elzar weakened by the cosmic storms, they were poised to wipe out the last remnants of the peaceful civilization. The Elzar's message was simple and heartfelt. It was not a call for pity, nor for charity. It was a call for aid. They offered what little they could in exchange: their advanced knowledge of energy manipulation and environmental harmony. They promised that if humans helped them overcome their immediate threats, they would share their wisdom with humanity. They had no other choice but to place their fate in the hands of a species they knew little about, and in doing so they sent their hopes and their trust across the stars, hoping that the humans of Earth would answer their call. The message from the Elzar arrived in the form of a simple signal, one that was intercepted by Earth's communication systems with a strange and unsettling urgency. The first response came from a small but highly respected group of scientists and diplomats who had been working on expanding humanity's presence in the stars. They knew that the signal was genuine, but the content left them uneasy. There was a clear sense of desperation in the Elzar's words, and yet their request seemed impossible. How could humans help a species so far from Earth, facing cosmic forces beyond anyone's control? They had no idea what the Elzar truly wanted or what they might ask for, but the offer of knowledge was intriguing. The diplomats and scientists debated fiercely among themselves for days. Some argued that the Elzar could be a valuable ally if they could help humanity unlock new technologies and secrets of the universe. Others feared that the Elzar might be trying to manipulate humanity for their own survival, while leaving Earth exposed to dangerous cosmic threats. In the end, after much deliberation, the decision was made: a human delegation would be sent to make contact with the Elzar and assess the situation. The task was given to a seasoned diplomat named Marcus Henson and a team of military advisors led by Captain Alexis Torres. They were not certain what they would find, or if the Elzar could truly be trusted, but they knew this was a risk. Humanity had to take the journey to the Elzar system took several weeks as the human fleet entered uncharted territories. Beyond the known galaxy, tensions were high. The crew had little information about the Elzar beyond what had been shared in their messages, and even less about their true capabilities. Most of the military officers saw the mission as an unnecessary gamble. They were skeptical about helping a species that had no true defenses, and even less about their fragile technology. Yet Captain Torres kept an open mind. She had seen firsthand how underestimated forces could change the tide of a battle, and she wasn't about to dismiss the Elzar outright without first understanding their plight. When the human fleet finally arrived near the Elzar homeworld, they found a planet on the brink of collapse. The once beautiful landmasses were now cracked and scorched. Vast clouds of swirling energy and dust filled the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. Entire cities lay in ruins, and the signs of a civilization in decline were everywhere. The Elzar fleet was small and defensive, but it was clear they had fought to protect their world for as long as they could. The delegation was met with a somber reception from the Elzar leadership, their faces marked by both sorrow and hope. They led the humans to their capital, a dome-shaped structure built into the heart of what was left of their planet's lush landscape. Here the Elzar leaders explained their story, their centuries of peace shattered by forces beyond their control, their once advanced technology now inoperable against the cosmic storms that had ravaged their planet, and the imminent threat of the Krenthu who had begun their approach. It was a harsh reality, a reality that human diplomats had not expected to find. But as the humans listened, they saw something they hadn't anticipated: resilience in the eyes of the Elzar. Even in the face of such overwhelming adversity, there was a quiet strength, a determination to survive, and to find hope in the darkest of times. It was then that the humans realized the Elzar were not as defenseless as they seemed. Their true power was not in their technology, but in their unwavering spirit to persevere even when the cosmos seemed determined to reject them. The humans spent the next few days on the Elzar homeworld, getting to know the alien race better. As Captain Torres and her team worked closely with the Elzar leaders, they came to understand that the Elzar were not a species used to violence or war. They were thinkers, philosophers, and engineers. Their greatest achievements had been in understanding the natural forces of the universe and using their advanced knowledge to live in harmony with the environment. But this way of life had made them ill-prepared for the sudden and catastrophic events that had begun to unfold around them. Their world was literally falling apart, and they had no way to stop it. Captain Torres saw firsthand how vulnerable the Elzar were. Their cities and technological marvels that once served as beacons of their civilization were now crumbling under the weight of endless storms and growing desperation. Yet in the face of such devastation, the Elzar had not given up on their survival. They were determined to find a way to push through and to continue their peaceful existence. However they could. The decision to offer help was not an easy one for Earth's leaders. There were many risks to consider. Humanity was just beginning to establish itself in the galactic community, and involvement in another species conflict could expose Earth to unforeseen dangers. At the same time, they couldn't ignore the suffering of the Elzar. The human delegation had seen the destruction firsthand, and it was clear that if the Elzar fell, the consequences for the galaxy could be severe. The Krenthu were an aggressive species known for their merciless tactics, and it was only a matter of time before they moved in for the kill. Earth could not afford to ignore a galactic power vacuum created by the fall of the Elzar. If humanity refused to act, the Krenthu would undoubtedly take advantage of the situation, and their expansion would threaten Earth as well. There was also the matter of the unknown. The Elzar had promised knowledge, a shared understanding of energy manipulation and environmental technologies that could advance humanity's own capabilities. But could this knowledge be trusted? Could it truly help Earth defend itself against future threats? Captain Torres was particularly wary of this. As a soldier, she had seen enough potential traps in her career to be cautious about what was offered on the table, but she was also aware that if humanity didn't act soon, the Elzar's enemies would come without mercy and without hesitation. It wasn't just the Elzar's survival at stake. It was the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. After much deliberation, Earth's leadership gave the order to intervene. They would offer their assistance to the Elzar, but they would do so carefully. The military would provide a defensive force to protect the Elzar from the Krinthu, but the humans would also focus on studying the Elzar's technologies to understand them better. Captain Torres was chosen to lead the mission. Her experience in both combat and diplomacy made her the ideal candidate to balance the needs of the Elzar with the strategic interests of Earth. She knew it would be a delicate task. She would have to navigate the complexities of interspecies cooperation and ensure that Earth's interests were safeguarded, while also helping the Elzar rebuild. But above all, she felt an obligation to protect the innocent lives at risk. It was a duty she had taken on throughout her military career, but this mission felt different. The stakes were higher than she had ever known in all her years of service. As the human delegation prepared to leave for the Elzar capital, Torres stood by the window of their temporary headquarters, looking out at the dying world below. She could see the faint glimmers of hope in the Elzar eyes as they worked to rebuild what little remained, but she also saw the harsh reality of their struggle. She understood now that the Elzar weren't asking for pity, they weren't asking for charity, they were asking for help in the face of annihilation, and she could not refuse them, not when humanity had the power to make a difference. No matter how small the risk might seem, this was a moment in time when Earth had the chance to protect not just one world, but the balance of the entire galaxy, and that responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. As the fleet prepared to launch, Captain Torres made a vow to herself and to the Elzar. She would do everything in her power to help them rebuild and protect their future. It was the least she could do for a species that had done nothing but seek peace. The human fleet arrived in orbit around the Elzar homeworld, a vast and majestic sight that had once been teeming with life, now barren and struggling under the weight of the disasters that had torn it apart. The planet's surface was scarred with deep fissures from the cosmic storms, and massive cracks ran through its once thriving cities. The human delegation was struck by the sheer scale of the devastation, yet there was an undeniable resilience in the Elzar as they welcomed the humans to their crumbling cities. It was a quiet acknowledgement of trust and hope that humanity could offer something they no longer had. The Elzar's leaders took Captain Torres and her team on a tour of the capital, which had once been a bustling metropolis, now reduced to a shadow of its former self. They passed through the grand domes that had been built to protect against the storms, but the structures were cracked, and some had collapsed entirely. There was no denying that the Elzar had done their best to adapt to the forces of nature, but the relentless pressure of time and chaos had proved too much. Their technology had been exceptional, once a harmonious blend of advanced engineering and natural energy manipulation, but now much of it lay dormant. The Elzar had struggled to keep their systems running, but without the resources to maintain their infrastructure, their society was crumbling. Torres could see the deep frustration and sorrow in the eyes of the Elzar leaders as they explained how their advanced systems were now failing them one by one. Entire sectors of their power grid had gone offline, and without the ability to recharge the energy crystals that powered their technology, they were unable to keep their cities shielded from the worst of the storms. The human delegation quickly realized how critical the situation was as they toured the remains of the Elzar's once thriving research labs. They saw advanced technologies that humanity had never even dreamed of. Some systems were based on the manipulation of energy fields that could control the weather itself, while others harnessed the power of nearby stars for clean energy. Captain Torres couldn't help but feel a growing sense of awe at the potential the Elzar's technology represented, but it was also clear that without their help, humanity would have no way to unlock the full potential of these systems on their own. The two species had to cooperate if either was going to survive. This was not just a war for survival, it was a war for knowledge. Captain Torres met with the Elzar's leading scientists, who were determined to share their knowledge with humanity. Despite their people's situation, they believed that humanity could be trusted to use their discoveries wisely in exchange for protection against the Krinthu and other threats. They spoke of ancient methods of harnessing cosmic energy in ways that humans had never conceived of. While some of the technology seemed too far beyond Earth's current capabilities, Torres knew that even the smallest breakthrough could make a difference. As they talked, she could see the passion in the eyes of the Elzar scientists, a belief that their knowledge would one day help their allies, even if their own world was lost in the process. The more Captain Torres learned, the more she understood that this partnership was not a one-sided bargain. The Elzar were not seeking protection for the sake of survival alone. They were offering humanity an opportunity to grow and evolve in ways that might have taken millennia for humans to discover on their own. It was a powerful realization, and one that weighed heavily on Torres's heart. If they succeeded, it would be more than just a victory for the Elzar. It would be a triumph for humanity. As well, she knew that the stakes were high and the path ahead was uncertain. But there was no turning back now. The Elzar had placed their trust in them, and humanity's response would determine the fate of both worlds. Captain Torres took a deep breath as she looked out over the broken landscape below, knowing that the battles ahead would test them all in ways they had never imagined. But she also knew that together they could overcome the odds, no matter how insurmountable they seemed. The tension grew as Captain Torres and her team worked closely with the Elzar engineers to devise a plan of action. They knew the Kryn'thu were only a matter of days away from invading, and if they didn't find a way to strengthen the Elzar defenses in time, the consequences would be disastrous. The humans set to work using their military expertise to assess the Elzar's defenses, while the Elzar scientists and engineers began explaining the intricacies of their ancient technology. Some of the systems were still functional, but many needed extensive repairs or complete overhauls. The energy shields that had once protected entire cities were now severely weakened, and their starships had become little more than floating debris in space. The Elzar's advanced understanding of energy manipulation gave the humans a starting point, but it became clear very quickly that the two species would need to work together to find a solution. Captain Torres understood the importance of making sure the Elzar's trust wasn't misplaced. The Kryn'thu were ruthless invaders, and their warships were enormous, their weapon systems unmatched by most species in the galaxy. The humans couldn't afford to make any mistakes with this alliance, especially when there was so much at stake. She gathered her team and began working directly with Elzar engineers to repair the technology the Elzar had shared with them. The work was painstaking and difficult, but Torres was determined to make it work. She could see the fear in the eyes of the Elzar as they watched their homeworld crumble, and she knew that they were counting on the humans to be the ones to turn the tide. Torres personally oversaw the integration of human technology into the Elzar systems. Their military-grade shielding technology was adapted to strengthen the Elzar's protective barriers, and the humans provided tactical training to Elzar officers who had never seen battle before. There was an undeniable sense of camaraderie that began to form between the two species. Despite the challenges and cultural differences, each side brought their strengths to the table. The Elzar's energy manipulation technology was beyond anything the humans had ever encountered, but they quickly realized that combining it with human combat strategies might give them an edge against the Kryn'thu. Captain Torres could see that the Elzar were not helpless as they had once appeared. Their peaceful nature had prevented them from developing the kind of military culture that the humans had, but their ability to adapt and learn quickly proved invaluable. They weren't just relying on human tactics. They were developing their own methods of countering the Kryn'thu threat. The two species formed a hybrid defense strategy that combined Elzar energy fields with human offensive firepower. Their combined fleet began to take shape, and for the first time since their arrival on the Elzar homeworld, the humans felt a sense of optimism that they weren't just protecting a defenseless species, they were working together as allies in a battle for survival. The Elzar were grateful for the help, but they were also determined to do more than just survive. They wanted to fight back. They wanted to show the Kryn'thu that they would not be easy prey. Captain Torres understood that desire. She had seen it countless times in the eyes of soldiers facing impossible odds. The will to survive was powerful, and it was something the Elzar had in abundance. As the final pieces of the defense strategy came together, the humans prepared for what would be the first major battle between the two species, and the Kryn'thu fleet would soon arrive. The Elzar were ready for war in a way they had never been before, But it was more than just technology and tactics that they had gained from the humans. It was confidence, the belief that even a peaceful race could stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds. The humans had given them that belief, and Captain Torres couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for the Elzar. Their strength was not in their weaponry or their military might, it was in their resolve, their ability to face the darkness and find a way to fight back. They weren't just a defenseless species anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with. The day of the battle arrived faster than anyone expected. The Kryn'thu fleet had appeared on the edge of the Elzar system, a terrifying sight of dark warships moving relentlessly toward their target. As the Kryn'thu ships loomed larger on the scanners, Captain Torres gathered her team in the command center of the newly reinforced Elzar flagship. The humans and Elzar had worked tirelessly for weeks to prepare for this moment. But now that it was here, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. The Elzar were not warriors by nature, but they were determined to defend their world at all costs. They stood alongside the humans, now united in a common cause to protect their homes, their way of life. Torres had seen many battles in her career, but there was something different about this one. The stakes were higher. The outcome would determine not just the future of the Elzar, but the balance of power in the galaxy, as well as the future of humanity's involvement in it. The Kryn'thu were vicious and aggressive, but they underestimated the Elzar's resolve. They had assumed that a peaceful species on the brink of collapse would be easy prey, but they were wrong. Captain Torres and her Elzar counterparts watched as the Kryn'thu fleet approached. The human and Elzar ships moved into position, their new hybrid defenses activated, and the energy fields began to hum with power. The shields that once were fragile and near useless now blazed with intensity, stronger than they had ever been before. It was a testament to the incredible work of both species coming together against a common enemy. The Kryn'thu opened fire first. Their massive cannons unleashed devastating blasts of energy aimed directly at the heart of the Elzar's defenses. But the new shields held. They crackled under the force, but they didn't collapse. The humans and Elzar reacted swiftly. The human fleet moved forward, launching a coordinated attack against the Kryn'thu warships, using a combination of Elzar energy manipulation techniques and human weaponry. It was a sight to behold. The Elzar were able to control the energy fields around the Kryn'thu ships, causing disruptions in their power systems, while the human ships targeted weak spots in the Kryn'thu hulls. The battle quickly escalated as more Kryn'thu vessels arrived, and the space around the planet became a chaotic battleground. But the human and Elzar forces stood firm. They'd fought not just for their survival, but for the chance to reclaim their worlds from the brink of destruction. The Kryn'thu underestimated the Elzar's resilience and the strategic ingenuity the humans brought to the fight. It wasn't just a defensive effort anymore. The humans and Elzar fought back fiercely. Torres led the human fleet with precision. Her voice was calm but decisive as she gave orders, coordinating strikes and movements with the Elzar fleet. The combined efforts of both species began to take its toll on the Kryn'thu forces. For every warship they destroyed, the Kryn'thu retaliated with even more fury. But it wasn't enough. The Elzar were using their energy systems to blind the Kryn'thu ships, disabling their weaponry and shields, while the humans continued to strike with relentless force. The turning point came when a critical strike from a human destroyer shattered the command ship of the Kryn'thu fleet. The blast rocked space itself, and the Kryn'thu forces began to fall into disarray. Torres could see the moment. The Kryn'thu lost their coordination, their ships scattered, and panic spread among their ranks. The Elzar saw their opportunity and took it. They unleashed a final surge of energy through their planetary shields, causing a massive shockwave that crippled the remaining Kryn'thu ships. The battle was won, but at great cost. The Elzar had lost many ships and soldiers. In the fight, the human fleet had taken damage as well, but they had managed to push the Kryn'thu back into retreat. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one of triumph. It was a victory of survival, a victory that came at the expense of lives on both sides. As the debris of the Kryn'thu fleet scattered across space and the battle subsided, the humans and Elzar looked to each other. The weight of what they had just accomplished was not lost on either side. They had won, but the war was far from over. The Kryn'thu would regroup and return, and new challenges awaited. But for now, the Elzar were safe, and humanity had proven their worth as allies. They had not just protected a defenseless species, they had fought alongside them and emerged victorious. The bond between the two races had been forged in battle, and it was stronger than ever before. In the aftermath of the battle, the skies above the Elzar homeworld were filled with the remnants of the Krinthu fleet, drifting aimlessly in space. The victory had come at a great cost. Both human and Elzar ships lay scattered among the debris, some of their crew members lost to the fight. But as the final remnants of the Krinthu forces retreated into the vastness of space, the survivors on the Elzar world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The humans had held true to their word, and their cooperation had turned the tide in a way the Elzar had never believed possible. Captain Torres stood on the observation deck of the Elzar flagship, her gaze fixed on the burning remains of the Krinthu ships scattered across the void. It was hard to feel victorious when the price had been so high, yet the humans had done what they had set out to do. They had helped the Elzar defend their world, and in doing so had secured their place as allies among the stars. The battle had not been easy, but it had forged something stronger than just an alliance. It had created a bond between the two species that neither side could deny. The Elzar had once been a peaceful people who had never known the brutality of war, but now they understood the importance of standing up and fighting back. When the stakes were high, they had learned from the humans how to push through the fear and face the unknown. With resolve, they had seen the strength that humanity carried, not just in technology or firepower, but in the will to survive. The humans had not only protected them, they had taught them how to fight for their survival. Captain Torres knew that the Krinthu wouldn't stay away for long. They would regroup and return with more force. But now the Elzar were not as helpless as they had once been. They had learned how to defend themselves, and in the process had gained something even more valuable: knowledge that could change the fate of the galaxy. The Elzar scientists had already begun analyzing the technology that had been shared with them by the humans, and their own discoveries during the battle. The fusion of Elzar energy manipulation techniques with human military strategies had proven effective, and the potential for future advancements was immense. If humanity and the Elzar could continue working together, there was no telling how far they could go. Captain Torres was deep in thought as she prepared to meet with the Elzar leaders. Once again, she had seen their world in ruins, and she had seen their people at the brink of despair. But now she could see the spark of hope in their eyes. They were ready to rebuild, they were ready to fight, and they were ready to embrace the future alongside humanity. It was not the future she had once envisioned when she first arrived at the Elzar homeworld, but it was one she now believed in. The Elzar had never asked for help out of weakness. They had asked for it out of a desire to protect what was theirs and to build a better future for their people. They had not relied on humans because they couldn't defend themselves. They had relied on them because they had seen in humanity the same strength that they had always carried within themselves, a strength that had only been awakened through the trials of war and loss. Captain Torres met with the Elzar leaders in the war room. Their faces were weary, but filled with determination. They spoke of rebuilding their forces and of using the knowledge gained to expand their understanding of the universe. They spoke of a future where they would not just survive, but thrive, and humanity would stand beside them as allies in a galaxy that would soon be reshaped by the partnership they had forged. Torres listened carefully as they discussed their plans for the future. It was clear that the Elzar were no longer the same peaceful race they had been before the battle, but that was not a bad thing. They had learned what it took to survive, and they had learned that there was no room for complacency in the harsh realities of the galaxy. The time for passivity had passed, and the time for action had arrived. They had allies in humanity, and together they would ensure that neither race would ever be caught unprepared again. The days following the battle were filled with a mix of recovery and reflection. The Elzar had suffered great losses, but they were a determined species, and their resilience had become even more apparent as they began to rebuild their cities and infrastructure. The humans continued to work alongside them, offering assistance and sharing their own resources to help them recover. It was a slow process, but it was one that carried hope. Captain Torres spent much of her time coordinating with the Elzar leadership, ensuring that the joint efforts between the two species were moving forward. She had seen the Elzar transform from a species on the brink of extinction to one that was actively shaping its own future with humanity at their side. The alliance between the humans and Elzar had become something more than a simple partnership. It had become a symbol of the strength that could be found in unity. When two very different cultures came together with a common goal, there was little they couldn't accomplish. As the Elzar began to recover their technological capabilities, they shared more of their ancient knowledge with the humans, and in turn the humans gave the Elzar access to new technologies that would strengthen their defenses and enhance their ability to adapt to the changing universe together. They began exploring ways to further advance energy manipulation techniques that could reshape entire star systems. Captain Torres watched as the Elzar scientists worked with the human engineers, their collaboration bringing forth ideas that neither species could have achieved alone. It was an exciting time, and one that brought with it a sense of purpose for both sides. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving and building something greater than the sum of their parts. Yet even as the rebuilding continued, Captain Torres couldn't shake the feeling that the Kryn'thu were still out there. She knew that the retreat of the Kryn'thu fleet was only temporary, and that the galaxy was filled with dangers far worse than what they had already faced. But she also knew that the Elzar were no longer the vulnerable race they had once been. They were stronger and more capable, and they would stand side by side with humanity against any future threats. The humans had proven their ability to defend and protect the Elzar, but now they were beginning to understand that the Elzar had their own strength to offer, and that strength would only grow as the alliance between the two races deepened. Captain Torres had seen firsthand the incredible transformation of the Elzar. They had learned to fight and to protect their world not out of desperation, but out of necessity. And with the humans' guidance, they had become more than just survivors. They had become warriors in their own right. The human forces were not there to impose their will, but to support and guide the Elzar toward a future where they could stand independently. Yet the bond between the two species remained unbreakable. They had formed a bond of trust and mutual respect that was now the foundation for their shared future. It was clear that the Kryn'thu would not be the last threat they would face together, and there would be more challenges ahead. But Captain Torres was no longer worried about the Elzar's ability to stand up to those challenges. They had proven themselves capable and strong. They had risen from the ashes of their near destruction, and now they would rise even higher. The humans had given them the tools to defend themselves, but the Elzar had given humanity something equally important. They had shown them the true meaning of strength, not in firepower or military might, but in resilience, the ability to endure and to rise again, no matter how great the challenge. Captain Torres stood on the balcony overlooking the rebuilt city. Below it was a quiet moment, but one that held deep meaning. She knew that their journey had only just begun. There were still enemies to face and uncertainties to overcome, but as long as the Elzar and humanity stood together, she was certain there was nothing they couldn't face. She felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished, and a growing sense of hope for the future they had forged together. No longer were the Elzar the defenseless species they had once been. They were a proud ally and equal partner in the galaxy, and with humanity by their side, they would continue to thrive and protect the balance of the cosmos, no matter what threats lay ahead.